All right. All right. Good morning, everybody. This is Joe here with Skit.ai. So we're just going to wait about a minute or so, and then I will kick off the Skit Talks webinar series. I'll introduce our panelist here, and then I'll get into the topic for today. So we'll just wait here about another 30 seconds for everyone to join. Throughout the presentation, please provide any questions. You can put them right into the chat. Throughout the presentation, I'll pause our panelists and our speakers, and I will chime in with your questions. And then, of course, at the end, I'll say about 5 to 10 minutes to address any kind of general questions that we didn't get to throughout the webinar. So this should run for about an hour to an hour and 15 minutes with the QA at the end. So as I said, we'll give here another 30 seconds or so, and then we will kick it off. Thanks. All right. So to get started, just to give you guys the topic for today. So today we're going to be covering the collaborative power of voice AI in debt collections. So as I said, I'm the host. My name is Joe DiMarzio. I'm the customer success manager lead here at Skit.ai. Today we have two speakers. So we have our guest speaker, Daniel Klein, CEO of Uown Leasing, and we have our speaker from Skit.ai, Amit Ambre, VP of Customer Success and Delivery here with us today. So again, welcome. And to our Skit Talk series. This is a continuous series that we do run more or less every about 2 to 4 weeks with new and every different topics. So definitely check out LinkedIn. You'll get different invites. We do try to change up the different topics each and every Skit Talks. And as I said, it runs about every 2 to 4 weeks. We look to do a new session with industry leaders and things. So as I mentioned, today's topic in the webinar is going to be the collaborative power of voice AI in debt collections. And just to give a little background on some of our speakers here. So as I mentioned, our guest speaker today is Daniel Klein, CEO of Uown Leasing. Daniel brings 28 years of strategy, finance, and operational experience to Uown Leasing. And for the last 24 years, he has been in the financial and operational leadership roles in many different types of companies. He has also held the role of CFO and COO in multiple organizations. He has experience in lease-to-own space when he was responsible for the selection and implementation of financing programs for one of the top 100 furniture store chains in the United States. In his time away from work, Dan does enjoy time with his wife, Tracy, and his 4 kids, and he currently serves on the board of directors of the Florida Holocaust Museum. While at the helm of Uown Leasing, he's grown the organization business by over 10x over the past 5 years, and he's optimized the cost structure of the business through using 100% automation, underwriting, and use of offshore call centers. Customer self-service was a huge opportunity for the company throughout 2020 through 2022. And AI seemed to be the next logical point of focus, which has led Dan to be working with us today. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you.
And just a little background on Amit from Skit. So Amit Ambre is our VP at Skit.ai. He heads delivery and customer success and is focusing on voice and multi-channel AI solutions to revolutionize interactions in the debt collections and customer contact center space. Prior to this, Amit has held leadership roles in sales technology and consulting, including heading enterprise sales at Black Buck, helping clients drive digital transformation at Oracle, and leading consulting projects for McKinsey and Company across multiple geographies. Welcome, Amit.
Hi, everyone.
All right, so like I said, this webinar is going to explore the collaborative power of voice AI in the debt collection industry, with a specific focus on the lease-to-own sector. We'll discuss the overall advantage and impact of AI, highlighting how it can drive improvements across various aspects of the debt collection space. From enhancing customer interactions to increasing efficiency, we'll cover how voice AI is transforming the industry and helping organizations tackle challenges in new, innovative ways. So to kick it off, my first question is over to Dan. So Dan, with over 30 years of strategy and financial experience, why did you feel AI was the next logical step in optimizing your business?
For us, as you said, when I got here, we went through this period of growth, and I joined an organization that was very much paper-driven and human process-driven. And we looked for each area to take the human component out. from a risk management standpoint as well as from a consistency standpoint. So after we had done what we could do in terms of driving the customer to work for themselves in a customer portal self-service model, it became an opportunity to find those areas where we could use AI to have those initial interactions and take the easy stuff away, right? You can't turn everything over to a computer. We've all had our frustrations at times with automated attendance on different companies' phone dial-ins and things like that. But ultimately, looking for the first step to go to an automated interaction for what would be the most commoditized approach for what we did. And that's really why we started down that road. And once you go from domestic call centers to offshore call centers, you don't have any payroll gains anymore, right? You've already taken that out. So if you're going to leverage your business and improve your cost structure as you grow, it was looking for that next opportunity.
Got it. No, and like I said, and that makes perfect sense as far as, most of our clients and most of consumers that we speak to, right, across the US. Yeah, it's the number one thing, right? Their goal is to enhance what they're already doing, right? And to reduce cost. And one way that they're seeing that happen is with AI. So it's just taking that leap. Um, did you feel that you saw any challenges when it comes to voice AI, right? Before diving into it, did you foresee any challenges that you felt like that you would face, maybe specific to you in leasing or just in general with AI?
I think the first hurdle we had to overcome was obviously a compliance hurdle. Not to say that AI is a not compliant product, but there definitely has not had the testing on it that you've had with your automated dialing systems or with your different human interactions. So we needed to get comfortable that the tech itself wasn't going to cause an uptick in litigation, wasn't going to cause an uptick in asserted claims, because all of those things are a distraction from the business. So getting through that was something. And then obviously, as you said, Joe, we're in the lease to own space. We're not a traditional debt collector. We're not a finance company. So finding a partner to work with who would be willing to tailor their product to deal with our terminology differences. We don't call it a loan. We don't call it interest. So all of those things were important to us to make our way through, because we couldn't have something that was going to go at the speed that AI can go at and that automation can go at and have the risk that it's, using the wrong words.
Good. No, and like I said, compliance is always kind of a number one factor across, every client, right? It's always a concern. And one great thing with AI and any kind of use of technology in general is that, there's no emotional factor to it. It's something that doesn't need to be trained. It's something that really has to follow the rules, right? So from a compliance standpoint, once those rules are put into place, we will never really see an issue, right? It can't go off script and things of that nature. But tackling really just voice, our product and in general, AI has gone beyond that. So this question is directed over to Admit. Beyond voice, what other mediums do you see AI utilizing in the debt collection space? So obviously voice is one, right? Making outbound and maybe inbound calls. But what other factors do you feel like AI would really fit within the debt collection space?
Thanks, Joe. So, as Dan kind of mentioned, the whole focus of kind of using AI is, you could obviously reach a certain chunk of customers for a certain, with a certain frequency using people, but then, wages have been challenging, getting people have been challenging, and you still need to kind of maximize the contact, right? Because contact is proportional to how better you can actually drive collections. And in that space, I think it's not just about voice, right? I think people are kind of being across different channels. You have kind of the younger demographic who is much more, comfortable with texting, right? You have certain people who, may not be so responsive over, text, but they are okay responding, in an async fashion and are like, for example, with Dan, we are also, along with voice, also doing an email bot pilot, right? Where we are kind of figuring out if email is something which we can use as a channel to also reach out to the customers as well as kind of answer some of the inbound queries which are kind of coming in. And at the end of the day, AI, it's model at the base of it, and irrespective of whichever medium you kind of work with, you can have the model, and you can kind of have the medium on the top to ensure that rather than humans, you have a artificial intelligence at the other end interacting. So we are seeing people taking it up across text, email, even website chatbots, right? We have clients who are basically kind of using chatbots leveraged by AI, with an AI in the background to kind of drive conversations. So yeah, I don't think medium is a challenge. It's effectively, where do you think you are going to get like the biggest bang for the buck, right? Where are your agents spending most of the time, where your volume is, and probably, that's probably the first choice for you to kind of go ahead and start automating with AI.
Got it. No, like I said, it makes sense. I mean, and then Dan, we just started mentioning costs, right? And for years, for 30 plus years, one of the main things that you're looking to do is to stay efficient, but at the same time, reduce operational costs. So, in what ways have you seen voice AI reduce your operational costs for you on leasing? Do you see this as a standard savings that, any industry could replicate?
I think it is. And I think that actually people who may be a little further behind the curve on offshoring than we are would even see greater savings than we saw, right? If you were comparing the savings against a domestic based call center cost structure, compared to, we do our calling that we have people at are in the Philippines and in Mexico, right? So, and we're probably 80% in the Philippines. So we're, an offshore cost structure for 80% of our staff, and nearshore for 20%. And we still saw a significant savings with using this. The other areas we saw cost savings, obviously, everything that's running through this bot is not running on the dialer. And then you're talking about capacity on your dialer and all of those aspects as well. For us, the way we looked at each stage that we've gone through with Skit and implementing the product has really been about how do we continue to grow the business without adding people, right? So we didn't look at this and say, okay, if we bring this on, we can drop 5 agents. What we really looked at, considering we've been in a business and period of growth for several years now and plan on being for several more, is by adding this functionality, can we continue to grow the business without adding people? So that's really been our goal. And I'll take what Amit said about medium, right? We did start, and I think we're month 3 on it now, in using the AI to respond to specific types of emails. That's been we call them our written team, the people who respond to SMS messages and email replies to payment reminders and settlement offers. That's been the number one area of our staff over the last 3 years that's been growing. If I go back 3 years ago, I probably had one person, maybe 2 people who responded to emails. If I go back to 3 months ago, that group was 10, 12 people. And we don't deal with blended agents because we are overseas. So we need to hire specifically for the written skill set there. So now we're able to see that we need less written agents because we're starting to see the positive signs of using the bot to respond to the emails. So my hope is as communication continues to grow and the customer does gravitate towards written communication, not written in terms of letter, but written in terms of email or SMS. And to be able to have the low-hanging fruit there taken away without agent interaction is really where we see some of our next savings coming in.
Got it. Yeah, and then that leads into really my next thing, right, which is customer experience. So we understand, right, the bot or AI in general can make your business more efficient, right? There is no way around it that a bot can dial more numbers, a bot can follow rules, a bot can follow a flow. But overall, what's the experience like for the consumer, right? Because after the first time that happens, the goal is that the piece of AI is keeping the person engaged, can answer their inquiry, and ultimately, if we're looking for it, collect or come to some kind of solution or outcome. So admit, this is a question over to you. How does Skit enhance its AI to ensure a smoother experience for the user? In general, what improvements has Skit made over the past year to enhance its more customer experience side of it versus just, again, still being as efficient as it can possibly be? In what way do you see the bot creating that human experience, which is something that most people, once they introduce AI, feel could be lacking?
Sure. So I think the first thing to kind of understand is consumers are getting comfortable with kind of bots calling them or their calls landing on the bot. Probably it's something which is going to accelerate as more and more of AI kind of penetrates, right? So effectively tomorrow, if the consumer is getting a call from the bot, they are not as surprised as probably what they were 2 or 3 years back as well, right? So I think that's a natural kind of an change which is anyway occurring and which will continue to occur as the AI technologies evolve. The second thing is even beyond what Skate is doing, the AI space itself has evolved so much in the last 2 years. I think a lot of the participants on the call might be aware of LLMs, Chat GPT, kind of the Gen AI technology coming in, the ability of the bots to kind of grasp what the customer is saying, to be able to handle utterances which are not which are non-standard, and then be able to kind of respond to them as like enhanced multifold, right? So effectively, that's again a natural kind of progress which has happened in the ecosystem as a whole. Now, where does kind of Skit leverage this? The problem is, along with this comes some of the risk, like hallucinations, right? Where, the bot, because it has access to huge models and huge kind of data sets, it might actually kind of start making up stuff or give the wrong information and so on and so forth. And that's where I think we have basically kind of uh, ensured that we have those right guardrails to ensure that, especially from a collection standpoint, as well as even from a customer service standpoint, any utterances which are kind of, which are kind of created by the bot or which are kind of sent out by the bot are within the compliance constraints which are imposed there, right? So effectively, the challenge right now has shifted. If I talk about 2 years back, the challenge was more in terms of how do I make the bot understand more. Now the challenge has shifted more to, the bot is able to understand most of the stuff. How do I ensure that it doesn't over understand or, kind of overstate something which it is not supposed to, right? And that is where I think a lot of the focus has been, without obviously impacting customer experience, right? I think the third thing which we have kind of involved in is also kind of mapping out some of the workflows, right? So effectively, I think there has been a more and more of an understanding that finally you are replacing an agent or you're augmenting an agent. So effectively, it's also very critical for to enable that it's the way the workflows of the bot or the way the flows are mapped out, it's kind of similar to the agent, or it's kind of aiding the work which agent is doing. So we have agent portal, right, which is something which we implemented about a year back, which kind of ensures that the agent doesn't have to repeat, gets real-time context in terms of, what the bot has basically kind of the journey that the bot has been through, and which kind of ensures that the customer doesn't need to repeat again. We have multiple kind of payment channels which have kind of which we have kind of integrated with, so that it's more of an end-to-end journey rather than kind of any need for the agent to come in to kind of complete of the payments. I think in addition, there are certain things which we are piloting, like context based kind of calls, where rather than starting from fresh, are there like any context? For example, you've already started reminder calls where people have said they will pay later. So rather than kind of giving them a fresh call, why can't we basically set up the context of PTP later and kind of ensure them that they pay? So all those things that trigger both to kind of maximize collections, which is obviously one of the key KPIs, but also to kind of ensure that the customer experience is much more smoother, so that customers actually enjoy interacting with the bot and they don't see it as something which kind of keeping them away from the real agent.
Yeah. And Dan, before I dive into it, because I'd love to hear kind of what feedback loop you might be getting, right, from your side from now working with us for over a year, any feedback from customers on the bot, their experience thus far. But we had a question come in. It's kind of a, more general. So I'd like to kind of just propose it and put it in here, kind of hear your guys' thoughts on it. Um, so AI in general, right, when it comes to other industries, maybe even outside of debt collection, where do we see it going, right? So specifically, they're asking, this is pertaining to more maybe the hospitality industry where they feel that human interaction is a necessity or needed. But do you think we're moving away from that, right? Do you feel that AI, obviously it's working in a debt collection space, it is almost doing a type of sales method, right, when speaking to a consumer? But do you feel that we're moving in that direction? Do you feel that we are generally moving in a way where AI can take over or be an assistance in a sales type role where it's using person sales, meetings, hosting? Do you feel that we can kind of maybe work in tandem with AI in these type of situations? Or do you feel like that AI can ultimately maybe replace a lot of these things where in maybe some other industries where they feel, human interaction is the number one thing? Love to just kind of hear your takes on it to see if, you feel AI could really kind of go into other avenues, even obviously debt collection is really specific, but could it actually evolve into and be used for other avenues or other industries as well?
So sure, I'll take that first a minute. So I think the answer is yes and no. And I think part of it comes down to the quality of the AI and the quality of the interaction. And I'll give an example, okay? One of the largest financial services companies in the world, I feel, has the absolute worst AI bot interaction of anyone I've ever dealt with. And that's American Express. American Express has the worst automated attendant AI system, to which, I'm very happy that I don't have anything other than a platinum card where they actually answer it with a real person. Because when you get the other side, you can spend your life trying to get to someone and it doesn't work well. So going back to what Amit said earlier about the guardrails, right? It's about the guardrails in a process, right? If someone's built an AI that's going to be quality and understanding what the likely requests are that it's getting, and has the right information to give back and keep you on track, then I think it can go into a lot of these service-based things. If someone's going to roll it out there and it doesn't have the ability to really understand what it's going to be faced with, and you're just in a vicious cycle of it asking you similar questions over and over again and not adapting to you, then it will be a miserable failure. So I think that, the right tech can expand into a sales role. But, I think there are probably more than just American Express. There's probably other examples of really bad tech that just doesn't work well. And you end up becoming frustrated by it. And the other thing that I think, and we've seen it with your system that has tying back to customer experience, the one thing we've gotten zero complaints from our customers about interaction with the bot. And I really think one of the reasons why we've gotten zero complaints is when I think the system does a good job to begin with, but that's besides the point. But when someone wants to break free of the system and get to a person, they're not put through 7, are you sure we can't help you here? There's going to be a wait. No, it just pushes them to a person when they ask for that person. And, we want as many people as possible to deal with the bot and get the job done, but we have to give them the opportunity to break out of it and get to a real person quickly without making them annoyed at how many steps it took them to get there. So I think as long as you create the drop-off points and you make the drop-off easy enough, people will use a bot for more and more. It's when, you're in a bot cycle and you want a real person and you can't get to the real person, then you're hanging up on the bot altogether.
No, and I'll completely agree with Daniel. In fact, like while in US we are we are mostly focused on collections. In India, we actually work across use cases, and we actually have a couple of hospitality use cases in India. We have our bot running for one of the biggest restaurant chains in India. We also have our bot running for the biggest airline in India, right? And in both the cases, as Daniel rightly mentioned, the reason it's working is because the bot is able to drive outcomes. And outcomes can be a mix of multiple things, right? If you talk about an airline, airlines are typically a loss-making business. So they care about profitability. So they want to ensure that the cost which they spend on customer service is limited without compromising on customer experience, because obviously they want the customers to return back to them. So I think the point is, the way to look at it is not in terms of whether it's AI versus human. The way to look at it is what helps you basically maximize the outcomes. It can be pure AI, then the AI better be very good. It can be a mix of AI and human so that you can use AI for certain tasks like maybe booking flights or basically kind of rescheduling flights, and you leave some of the complicated things to the agent. Or in the third case, if you want to really, if CX is primarily the outcome which you're going for and you actually don't care about the cost, it can just be purely human, right? So effectively, I think the way to look at it is, what are the outcomes you are kind of driving towards? And then, you have those 3 choices and you can find the right mix.
Yeah, and I think to that point, mix is a function of how premium of a product you're offering too, right? If you're calling to book a room or ask a question about a Marriott Courtyard, your acceptance of a bot is going to be very different than if you were booking for the Ritz-Carlton. I think that, everyone has to understand the segment of the market they participate in. And I think there is still an opportunity even at a Ritz-Carlton level type product, but it's probably less interactions handled with the bot. And it's got to be a very quick handoff to a person that doesn't cause any repeat. So I think, there's a use case anywhere for it at any point, but how deep it goes is a function of, how premium of a product you're trying to offer.
Got it. No, and like I said, it makes perfect sense. I'm always a big component that I feel AI in almost any situation can go hand in hand, right, with human intervention. And as you said, as we kind of go into, even ourselves, human intervention usually comes in at the highest level, right? When you're dealing with extremely large debt amounts, when you're dealing with extremely complex cases that really even a more, senior 10x year experience employee would be dealing with. Of course, then the bot is only looking to enhance the bot, but ultimately, in those situations, that's when human intervention is needed, right? So kind of goes into your example with a Ritz-Carlton versus a Marriott Courtyard. There's different levels, right? To how far and how it's really how far you want to make the bot or AI and how far you want to advance it. So there's always levels of human intervention that can be there. And there's technology is going to continue to grow where, maybe ultimately AI can take over in certain situations to make things more efficient. So I do agree. All right, so to Dan, my next question is in regards to KPIs and metrics, right? So as you said, one of the reasons you came into and wanted to explore and use AI was for efficiency, right? It makes sense, right? Ways to maybe cut some costs in different areas was to implement an AI system. So what kind of metrics or KPIs should companies use to measure the success of voice AI in the debt collection operations? If you can share some examples or any case studies from Uown Leasing, that'd be great. Just generally, what do you see as far as when you're looking at success, when we're meeting each and every month, what are you looking for? At the end of the day, what are you looking for as far as key metrics to tell you, hey, this is working and this is working well for us?
Sure. I think the metrics, in all honesty, the way the bot works are very similar to what you'd expect from a conventional agent, right? They're what you would expect from a human interaction. And actually, you have an ability to even get more granular with the bot because you have the ability of the technology to manage it. And so, if you think most fundamentally, right, when you're thinking about outbound contact centers, you're thinking about, okay, what's my call completion rate? How many calls get answered? When they get answered, did we figure out if we talked to the right person or not, the right party contact? Did we have a productive phone call? Meaning, did we reach a resolution? A resolution could be a payment made today or a commitment to pay in the future, or even just an update of information with the consumer so we understand what's going on with them. So all of those things are what we've looked at. And the way we look at the bot, we look at it just like it's an agent, right? So we're looking at the bot because if the bot is not as successful as the agent would be, even though it has a cost effectiveness, it's burning an opportunity. So today, our number one campaign we run every single day on the bot is we run all our accounts that are one payment past due. So it reaches out to these easier calls that it's not necessarily the first payment they missed. It could be at any point when an account becomes their first payment past due. Now, if the bot is not as good as an agent, it doesn't matter that the bot's faster or the bot's cheaper, because every one of those people it talks to, if it can't get the payment closure rate at the same payment closure rate that a human could be, that's money I lost. So ultimately, we're looking at it the same way of when we dial a phone call or the bot dials the call, what number of people validate that they're the customer, and then of the validated customers, which number of them have an interaction or a back and forth with the bot or with an agent, and then ultimately who pays. So that's how we look at it, and we're looking at it from that standpoint. And then obviously we measure a KPI in terms of performance by looking at the total cost of the platform, which is obviously the AI fee as well as the telecom charge relative to the dollars collected. And we've kind of applied the same internal hurdles that we would use when we evaluate those metrics against an agent. So at the end of the day, the bot can do a lot more. The bot as an agent does its whole work in, I don't know, combined throughout the day, 2 hours, 3 hours total maybe, where an agent would have spent 8 hours doing that work. But ultimately, the success is measured the same way. The metrics are the same for us. And we actually saw, because we could get through the calls so much faster with the bot, we actually saw an increase in success from the bot's outreach because we deal with the subprime consumer. Well, the subprime consumer typically is working a job where they're not responding to things while at work. So you've got their travel time to their job in the morning after it becomes legal to make a call. You've got kind of that 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. lunch break interval, and then kind of the end of the workday. And the bot, since it can do so much more than an auto dialer does with agents assigned to it in terms of frequency and speed of calling, we're able to get all of the calls we want to make in those windows where we've seen better success. So it's helped us out in that area as well.
Got it. No, and that makes sense, right? And one of the things that we always preach is, outcome success, right? Obviously we can look at bottom line payments, right? It's very easy to look at what is the bot collected, what is the bot transferred, and what has been collected. But ultimately, we want to see successful outcomes, right? We want to see that the bot was able to handle that inquiry correctly. If it was a transfer, the person right off the bat could have been verified and then just transferred, right? To us, that's still a successful outcome. That's what the user
Yeah.
wanted. It actually delivered a good user experience. So admit, this one's over to you then. I mean, outside of standard payments, as I just said, collected, right? That's a very easy black and white metric for us to show and deliver. What else do you feel that AI can be held accountable to, right? What other metrics do you feel that AI can help with, or they should be responsible for outside of just your standard downstream payment collected?
No, I think as Dan mentioned, it's more about looking at more from an ecosystem level, right? Because on the standalone basis, for example, the bot will be collecting certain dollars, but there will be a lot of customers who may not want to pay on the bot. There might be a lot of customers who are more keen to kind of speak with the agents, or there might be queries, etc., which the bot is currently not trained to basically handle. But as long as as an ecosystem, you are able to kind of handle the same volume of traffic, be able to kind of get collections kind of in the same vicinity, but at obviously lower manpower cost, right? I think that's basically effectively a win-win thing, right? So effectively, I think just looking at collections, see, because at the end of the day, it's a bot, right? So you need to ensure that whatever you're paying for, there has to be a collections kind of an outcome which is going to be driven. But more importantly, I think what it basically creates is more efficiency into the system. So I think effectively that's another thing which is very critical to look for. And there are metrics which kind of help you there, right? For example, connect rates. We have had customers where they've gotten better connect rates on the bot than what they were getting with agents. We have had customers which have generated a lot of right party connects, right? Especially some of the delinquent accounts or some of the later debt kind of cases, etc., where where they've not been able to reach the customers for a long time, and they finally got right party connects, and they have been able to kind of approach and be able to kind of get some payments out of it. I think in Dan's case, I think we are using it in Uown Leasing for settlements, right? So these are like, obviously very old accounts, etc., right? Which you may not be very keen for or you may not want to build capacity for that. And that's something, which can work very well through the bot, right? Maybe the returns you might be getting from them may not be commensurate, but it's effectively money which you may not have collected anyway, right? Or you would have not been keen to use your agents for that as well, right? So effectively, I think the way to look at it is holistically from an ecosystem, if you're actually doing better, both in terms of collections as well as cost, right? As well as kind of ensuring that, some of the queries, etc., around the customers are addressed. And if that's happening, that's probably a win-win from an AI perspective.
Got it. Cool. So now I do have a question here from the audience, but what I'm going to do actually kind of leads into what the next topic I wanted to get into, and then I'll ask the question to both of you, more specifically to Amit. But to Dan, my question is now on the integration side of it, right? One of the key aspects I believe us working with you on leasing has been kind of the smooth collaboration back and forth of data, right? That exchange of data back and forth from the client to us back to you. Um, you're very lucky, right? You have a lead there that's very good. Was able to kind of put everything very quickly from a technical standpoint and really kind of make this as little manual effort as possible. But like to kind of hear from you. I mean, how does voice AI right now integrate with your existing debt collection softwares or CRM systems? And then outside of voice, I know we started to mention you use like email. How is that incorporated in, right? Is that automated? How much, basically, we want to just learn about how much of this is manual on your end versus automated by your team and systems.
Sure. And look, I think, my opening discussion on things is I don't deal well with manual, right? I don't want to have manual process. I want to have automation. I'm fortunate that I have a software development staff of my own. We wrote, our lease loan management system is a proprietary system that we've built. And the way we built it was an API first structure. So we had the ability, as you guys had the ability to provide APIs to us, we could provide them back to you as well. So we don't deal in a scenario where we send a flat file and you send a response back. You have direct access to our system to pull the relevant data and to ultimately push the data back from your side so we know the outcomes. So while our agents do utilize your agent interface and your dashboard at times, the reality is things are happening in such real time with the way we've integrated with you all that if an agent is getting a call that is a transfer from the AI attendant, all they need to know is it was a transfer from the AI attendant because they know it's now a validated account that they're getting to not put the customer back through the validation. But they don't need to go anywhere else because we've got that feed in real time from you all. So from a call standpoint, it's 100% automated. Files get sent to you every day. You provide back the real-time feedback throughout the process. When someone is processing a payment through the AI, it's actually processing on our system. So there's not even a middleware concept there. So, seamless would be the answer to that side. And the time it took your team to get things up to speed was impressive. We were able to do it in pretty short order. And when we got into the testing mode and, in the morning you would send and say, we think we've got it. And we'd look at it and we go, you've almost got it. And we'd send you back the edits or the comments of which fields we weren't pulling exactly right or pushing correctly to. It was not a 5-day turnaround to get it corrected. Sometimes the next version of the integration was the same day. Worst case, it was the next morning. On the move to email, that has become something that, a seamless integration, it was absolutely needed because the way we've utilized it from an email standpoint is we're not utilizing the auto attendant to send an original email. We're using it to respond. So we send through our system payment reminders, settlement offers, receipts for every transaction. And we basically, historically, we had fed those responses back when a consumer replied to them. They fed back into Zendesk, which is where our written agents would work and respond to them. Now we have certain types of responses to emails where someone's asking about a payoff or their next payment date, things that could easily be pulled from the system to provide. We're now, instead of having it route through Zendesk, we're having it route back through the bot to have the bot respond, and then ultimately we close out the interaction when the bot successfully did it. So we had the luxury of our system was very much open for interface. So we were able to interface everything directly, which has been very helpful to us.
Got it. And actually, now rereading the question that came from the audience, it actually is more towards you, Dan, and I think you really answered it. The question was, how do you how do you confirm the accuracy of the data returned by the bot that you ingest back into your system? But I think one way we were able to do that was this is a direct API, right? These aren't, I don't know, kind of loose files that we're uploading. And so all of the dispositions and the information being passed back is in the format and style at which your system
Accepts it.
ingests.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing I'll add to that, just because it's in the same realm, but it, kind of back to compliance. We actually do call reviews on the bot calls. So, we don't sit here and listen to thousands of them, but my QC department does pull. If we do, 2 calls per agent per day, we pull 2 bot calls per day and review the bot calls. And mainly that's for a combination of, compliance to make sure that those guardrails in place are working. And also so we can be confident that our lack of complaints isn't a lack of use and it's actually a good interaction with the consumer and the bot. So we treat it the same way we treat a an agent.
Got it.
And
No,
so
yeah,
just
go
to
ahead.
add like
Mhm.
what Dan mentioned, in the sense, I think initially in our old tech stack, we used to basically kind of rely on manual sampling as well to kind of also ensure that the accuracy at our end is kind of up to par. But the good news is once we have now shifted to the LLM, the Gen AI stack, I think we have made multiple changes in terms of kind of monitoring for accuracy at our end as well. First thing is, earlier we used to just kind of map the dispositions based on, what the bot was able to understand. But now separately, we also do it on the transcripts, right? So effectively, there is like, twice validation of the dispositions which the bot is kind of sending over. The second thing is we have also created something known as an imposter bot, which is kind of a QA bot which continuously keeps on sampling and continually keeps on kind of going through the bot calls, etc., and kind of ensuring that at a continued basis and not just at a human sampling basis, what the bot is basically being able to understand and what the bot is communicating is basically in line with the guardrails which we have set. So effectively, there has also been a improvement and transition which we have been able to do with the evolving technology as well.
Yeah, and just to add in general, I mean, just from the customer side, something new that we've implemented on the client-facing side here at Skit, specifically to help with that, right? One of the, as we keep mentioning, and I'll go back to a minute to answer a little more deeper on the compliance side of it, but there are a couple things, right? We want we want to be able to audit calls 24/7, right? Obviously, it's not feasible. We can't run and listen to every single call that the bot is making. But what we do is kind of break it down, right? We do like to listen to calls. We like the clients to provide us with calls, as Dan said. Him and his team will listen to a handful here and there. And we love the feedback loop, right? We want to know, was it a behavioral change, or is it a compliance change, or anything like that that needs to happen? We now have introduced actually an interface that the client and ourselves can interact with in real time, right? It's a more or less a dashboard that allows you to go in and actually allows you to post or put up these calls made and put them to these kind of task dashboards that's connected internally here at Skit. So what's really great about it is that you can upload a phone call. You can say, this is how the bot reacted. Here's how we want it to react. And ultimately, what we're able to do is assign and work on that task for you, and make changes. And you're able to kind of see it in real time. It's a new thing that we really just launched in the last couple of weeks that we've been rolling out. But it's a good way to kind of keep a checks and balances system in place, and a really visual way to do it. So that way, it's not just kind of a back and forth email exchange. It's ways for both the team itself, the client, and Skit to be able to kind of, as I said, checks and balances, kind of check on the bot 24/7 and be able to make changes when needed. Um, so this question, Dan, I'll shoot this to you before I go back to admit on the compliance side, just because it's pretty straightforward. What collection system are you using that allowed for the integration?
Yeah, so as I said, it's something we built ourselves. So
Yeah, yeah,
we had used purchase programs, and given that we're in the lease to own space versus a loan space, we needed something that wasn't looking for things to be principal and interest and all those other aspects. So we actually have a unified system from start to finish. So we use the same platform for our originations, our underwriting, our servicing, and our collections.
got it. Um, Now over to admit, obviously multiple times in this conversation, compliance, right? It's a kind of the number one thing, right? We obviously can always change the behavior of the bot. We can change the workflows of the bot, or any piece of AI, but compliance needs to be there in place. So how does voice AI ensure compliance with debt collection regulations, such as the Fair Debt Collection Practice Act, GDPR in the EU, US, things like that? What are we doing to ensure compliance across the board? Whether, as I said, are those daily checks? Are there built-in systems in place? What are we doing here at Skit to ensure that we are always at the highest point of compliance in an ever-growing or ever-changing space?
So what we have done is we kind of work with both first party collections or creditors directly, such as Uown Leasing, or we also work with third party collection agencies where the compliance requirements are even much more stringent, right? So what we have done is we have effectively built a compliance layer on top of the bot. So effectively, any leads which kind of get through to the bot, etc., it's already kind of filtered out for some of the TCPA regulations for the fact whether there is a consent agreement or not, right? So effectively, that's kind of the first layer of filter we kind of do to ensure that most of the TCPA regulations are met. I think the second time is also ensuring now that we are basically operating across channels. It's just not enough kind of doing it for voice. You need to also ensure that the compliance is across channels. The omni-channel compliance is in place. I think the third thing is also giving some flexibility to customers as well to kind of customize the bot to also adhere to, you know, additional regulations or additional restrictions which they may have at their end. Some of them might be creditor driven, some of them might be state driven, right? So, for example, we have customers who may not have uh, consent, but we give like on-call consent options as well on the call, where the bot kind of takes option consent on the call and goes and then goes and continues with the AI based calling. Beyond that, I think from an FDCPA level, just ensuring, as Dan mentioned, making it seamless for the bot to transfer to the agent whenever the customer requires, or in cases where, for example, if there are any cases where people want to opt out of any further calls, or there's a cease or desist kind of requirement, ensuring that any kind of that utterance is captured. So we kind of try to be conservative on that, right? So even if utterance may not mean that, we want to kind of ensure that we capture it, and then later on we can have the agency or the creditor kind of taking a call whether they want to kind of continue it. But I think for us, it's more important that we kind of capture it on the conservative side rather than be open to any legal liability. Right. Beyond that, I think since we kind of process payments on the ball, we are obviously, and since we have access to some of the PI data, we are basically PCI DSS compliant as well. We also basically kind of work with healthcare customers, so we are HIPAA compliant as well, right? So effectively, those are kind of the few things which we kind of do, and it's ever evolving, right? So we have a team which is completely dedicated to compliance, kind of keeps on monitoring these things both at a federal level as well as a state level. So if there are obviously any changes which kind of keep coming in terms of the regulations, we kind of ensure that there is a change which happens in the bot, either in terms of the flow or in terms of our compliance filter, to ensure that we stay compliant.
Got it. Yeah, and actually, we just had a question come in, and you actually just answered the second part of it. But curious if you're able to answer the first. So the first part of the question was, has the CFPB provided any guidance on using AI bots?
So to be honest, I don't know it at the uh, immediately, but definitely we'll kind of look into this. I think broadly, as far as I know, I think the guidance from CFPB has been more in terms of ensuring that you don't have make the customer difficult to kind of switch from the bot to an agent, right? You have to just make it very smooth, right? And secondly, for example, I think there is also another regulation where the customer needs to know that they are interacting with the bot, right?
Yeah,
Uh, so I think
I was
those are,
gonna
yeah, sorry.
I was
Sorry,
going to
Dan,
add
go
that.
ahead.
Yeah, when we had our legal review it, right? The big things for regulation are it's the same regulation as an agent, right? The only really additional regulation is that concept of you have to tell them they're dealing with a digital agent. So I think our calls when they start, it says this is the Uown digital agent, so it's very clear that that's where the interaction is with. Um, so there isn't a bunch of there's not a bunch of separate regulation. You can't have the bot make threats. Well, you couldn't make threats if you had an agent on the call. You can't have the bot lie. You can't lie if you had an agent on the call. So it's not that different in terms of the regulatory aspects of it.
And the best part is the bot is programmed. So effectively, as long as you're not programming it to
Yeah.
be threatened, it's not going to. It's not going to have a bad day.
Got it. No, great. No, and like you said, it's something that's going to be ever changing, right? And as I said, we ensure that we kind of keep our ears to the ground, right? Whatever things are changing, we are constantly making updates and changes to the bot. And as we keep mentioning here, we already put kind of those preliminary just safeguards in place, right? So no matter what, we always err on the side of caution. And then when needed, we're pretty quick to be able to react, to be able to make changes. But our goal is that we see that writing on the wall prior. We make changes a couple of weeks to months in advance. But it's something we have a team in place that we're constantly doing and safeguarding against. And as Dan mentioned, his team is doing the same thing, right? We're basically looking at even on that side of it, there, as I mentioned before, that kind of feedback loop back, right? Whenever something is said or heard, we're always here to listen to whatever the latest news is to make those changes, right? We want to ensure that you're getting the best experience with AI and with the skip bot. Um, okay. So this is to admit, what do you think's next for voice AI in the debt collection industry? Are there any emerging trends that you see or technologies that you think will further shape this space?
So I think in terms of technology, we are going to kind of keep on seeing an evolution in terms of the base models, right? We are also going to see an evolution in terms of how we are able to use the base models, use the correct prompts, etc., to kind of ensure that we are able to kind of get more out of the bot. What that will mean is, there are going to be more and more complicated scenarios which the bot is going to be able to handle. Right now, for example, the bot is probably useful for debt which is relatively early stage, or debt which is kind of relatively smaller size. But the new technology kind of gives us flexibility to enable the bot to kind of handle more complex negotiations. The ability to kind of also uh, uh, you know kind of use some context, right, with better integrations, etc., to kind of ensure that you kind of build the conversation across multiple calls rather than just having a fresh call every time. So those are kind of the things which are in the works. And as the base technology keeps on evolving, that's definitely going to come into play. So it's going to kind of look more and more like a typical agent, right? Maybe not replace them completely, but then kind of ensure that they are competitive to at least some of the average collectors out there. So definitely that's one. I think the second thing which is going to happen is kind of using those the AI omni-channel AI better, right? So that's where some of the strategy part and AI on the strategy collection strategy part is going to come into play. Because you are soon going to realize, as more and more data of AI calls kind of comes in, that there are certain demographic segments which are reacting well to AI calls. There are certain debt types which are reacting well to AI calls, and so on and so forth. And as that data builds up, there is going to be a better grasp in terms of figuring out what is the right time for somebody to kind of get an AI call, and what is the right time for an agent to call them, for example, to maximize the outcome. Or what is the time, as Dan mentioned, what is the right time of the day to basically kind of maximize your calling. And that's where probably AI kind of plays a role, because it enables you to kind of scale up calling during a short time window, right? So there is going to be a better understanding in terms of what works to kind of maximize the collection outcomes, right? And a lot of it is going to kind of use AI to kind of come up with those insights, and as well as use AI to kind of leverage those insights and drive those outcomes, right? So I think a mix of all of this, definitely there's a lot which is going to kind of evolve, right? And you know, I think people are still understanding what are the additional use cases, etc., which AI can drive. But I think these are some things which I can definitely see happening in probably a time period of probably a year and a half.
Yeah, no, and like I said, I think that's where AI is going, right? I think one fascinating part of it, especially in the debt collection space, is what kind of predictability can AI provide, right? One thing that obviously has been done in debt collection before is that you can use indicators, right? You can use score systems. But what if you had a piece in AI that's kind of doing that for you, right? So you're obviously running these campaigns, but what if we could use historical behavior and predict when, as we all keep mentioning, when to reach out to them, how to reach out to them, right? It's the best way via phone, email, text, chatbot, um, and it really collect all these engagement metrics. And over time, the bot and the AI is only getting smarter, right? And that's why it can actually predict future behavior. That's something exciting that I see, Skit and also just AI in general really getting towards, because now you have these thousands and thousands of data points. So you can actually start predicting behavior. And if you can do that, obviously then it goes back to the whole efficiency conversation, right? if we're able to predict when and how to interact with a consumer to get the best possible outcome, it's only going to help your efficiency, ultimately helping your bottom line cost. So it all kind of comes full circle, and that's something that I'm excited for. I think that's something that we are, getting close to, which is exciting. So Dan, I mean, as we're kind of talking about this and the innovative next steps, do you see any challenges with that, right? With AI, I mean, obviously we've talked about all the really positive and progressive things that AI has really helped with Uown Leasing specifically. Um, but do you see any common challenges that an organization could face, right? Or even that you guys faced maybe in the beginning, if you haven't mentioned it before, when implementing voice AI? We obviously know the compliance side of it, right? We have to make sure that's all in place. But was there any other challenges that you guys faced when maybe implementing us, or just in general when you started discussing AI as a solution? And then ultimately, how'd you overcome it?
So I would say from a challenges standpoint, the only thing you have to, in my world that I had to overcome, but luckily my team's used to me trying to be out on the forefront of things. You have the human backlash of it, right? So when people feel like if you implement new technology and if they read the newspaper or, scroll the internet, they feel like, oh, AI chatbots are going to take away my job. So you have to make sure that you don't have an internal friction point with your employees where they feel like they're being replaced through the process, right? So at the end of the day, getting them to understand this is in our world, this was a addition for growth, not a purpose for reduction was an important part. So that way you didn't have any internal backlash or an internal fighting against the process. When we started, I think we started with you guys and launched, I want to say the beginning of March or the end of February of 2024.
Yep.
And when we started, we were doing two things. We were doing these one payment past dues, and we were doing a settlement campaign. To Amit's point earlier, we were doing a settlement campaign to go after the really old accounts before we would sell them to a third party. And it was great and hugely successful. And the month of March, the month of April on that, we couldn't call people enough because at the end of the day, people were getting their tax money and it was the time people were paying. Then all of a sudden the month of May rolled around and we kept the settlement campaign going the same way we did during tax season. And I think I got a little shocked when I looked at the cost benefit analysis on the month of May's bill, because we were definitely making too much outreach at that point relative to the money available in the market. So we did have, the challenge we had to do is we launched in one season, it moved on to being more of a regular cycle, and we had to come back and figure out kind of what was the optimal level. So we went from doing the settlement campaign 3 times a week to doing the settlement campaign 3 times a week, every other week, to now, not in tax season, we figured out that the right level is the settlement campaign 3 times a month. And, it's very successful and has a great cost benefit when you run it 3 times a month. Now, with that said, kind of the first week we see that the IRS has said they're issuing direct deposit refunds, believe you me that we will be back to 3 times a week for the first several weeks of tax season, if not the first 2 months of tax season. But we had to have those learnings in the process. So, you've got the human challenge because obviously people feel that they could be replaced, and that's management. You have to manage your people, let them understand why you're doing something, and make them not feel threatened by the addition of technology.
Got it. Yeah, no, and it's something I've always kind of preached, right? It's always kind of the human side of it. I always say like AI is not necessarily replacing human agents, but they're rather augmenting their roles, right? They're a supplement. They're there to help you because it's replacing a lot of maybe your repetitive tasks that you guys are handling each and every day, right? That's ultimately why I think AI is so important in the debt collection space. It's just making a good agent a great one, right? It's allowing them to focus on more complex cases or negotiations,
Right.
empathy, sensitive situations. They can deal with all that when the repetitive dialing and calling and taking note taking, that can all be done by AI in a very smooth and efficient way.
And I think that, it may cause as a company, it may cause you need to rethink your compensation structure a little bit too, right? if your people were used to making a good chunk of their monthly bonus numbers based on these low hanging fruit calls that you've now pushed off to the AI, it's not this, you need to maybe pay more for the complicated work or set the hurdle at a different rate for the complicated work because they're not going to get boosted up off the low stuff. So, understanding what outcomes you're achieving and adjusting, reward is an important part of the process. The great news is there is no reward for what gets done. The AI is not holding out its hand asking for a bonus at the end of the month. It's just getting its bill. So, you can absolutely make it work, and you just may need to restructure how you think about things to be fair to your people in the process, to not cause that point of contention between them.
No, and Dan, I think the last point you made is super relevant because I think that's one of the things which we have also been discussing with few of the agencies, where, for example, I think one of the common pushback is, there are still a fair chunk of PDP calls which are kind of passing to the agents. The agents is making payments and they're still making the same commissions on them as what they were making earlier, right? And and then effectively there are questions raised in terms of the bot ROI. But I think the answer there, as you rightly said, and there are a few agencies which have done that very well, where they created a separate AI agent desk. So effectively, the AI calls kind of land up with a very specific set of agents, and you have a very separate kind of a compensation structure. You have a separate kind of training on them, right? And you probably even have some of them have even their base AI agents collectors or kind of handling those AI calls
Listen,
because they do the grunt work.
our agents love the calls that are the transfers from the bot because that
Mhm.
is the warmest contact you can get. That is someone who we've already interacted with and they've stayed engaged long enough to want to come to a person to talk about something. So it's their absolute best opportunity to make money that day.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah, it's a warm lead, right? The bot just did the work.
Yep.
So legwork for you. Cool. So again, as we're kind of closing here, I have one last question I'll kind of propose to both of you. Just love to hear your thoughts on it. And like I said, if there's any other questions that come here in the QA, I'll bring those in as well. But this is to both of you. So you guys can just jump in kind of with some closing remarks here. But how do you see the relationship between voice AI and debt collection evolving over the next 5 to 10 years, right? Where do you see this technology going?
I mean, my opinion is it's going to expand, right? As I said, we took this from the easiest use cases that we could wrap our heads around to begin with, and we felt comfortable that the bot could do. Now that we've seen, 10 months of activity on the bot, or I should say, when we saw 6, 7 months, we started down the exercise of let's have it do the written replies for us. So I think that, as myself, my team, our legals gotten comfortable with the compliance and the guardrails, we'll continue to look for activity we can drive through the bot, because it's going to be better and it just gets better over time. So ultimately, where today I would say, the bot's handling 10%, 15% of our interactions, I don't see it in our world. I don't see it getting to 50, but could I see that 10 or 15% getting to 25 to 30%? I absolutely do. So I think it'll become a more meaningful part of the business, but I don't see it becoming half or a replacement of the actual human element as well.
Yeah. So I think I agree with Dan completely. I feel there are kind of four parallel threads which or kind of four parallel improvements which will be happening over the course of the next few years. I think we already talk about the base technology kind of evolving. The second thing is, vendors or, kind of supporting software providers such as system of record players, telephony players, etc., are very critical, right, for the bot to be successful, or even like a text players. And a lot of those guys, they were not built to be AI native. Now, I think a lot of them are becoming cloud native and AI native. So effectively, data exchange is going to become much more seamless, and that's also going to have a multiplier effect. I think the third part is both on the agent side as well as on the customer side, people are going to get more comfortable to the bot, obviously with the underlying assumption that the bot quality kind of improves, right? And that's obviously going to be another big kind of improvement lever. And the fourth thing is I feel over the course of time regulations are going to become much more detailed and thorough, right? Because right now I think there is still a fair bit of ambiguity in terms of how to use AI. But I'm assuming, as it kind of becomes more and more dominant, regulation is going to be much more clear in terms of how to kind of manage AI, and probably much more supportive as well, right? Towards using AI for the right purposes. So I feel, I think all this threads kind of working in parallel is definitely going to make AI. But as Dan rightly mentioned, it's not going to completely replace humans, but effectively we can look at, kind of seeing an efficiency improvement in the range of like, 30, 40, 50% happening at the agency level because of this.
Got it. Cool. Let me just see any questions.
I think I'll just quickly answer. So we have integrations with already with TCN, right? We also have it with LiveVox, right? So I think those are the two dialer platforms we are working with. Beyond that, we are also basically in process of basically kind of having our integrations probably in the next space of a couple of months, kind of done with two, three other platforms as well. In addition to that, if it's a cloud-based platform, cloud-based telephony, etc., it's pretty simple because in most of the cases, SIP integration. So we typically prefer SIP integration to kind of for telephony integration, especially on the inbound side. So effectively, that's something which we can definitely set it up. But just in case if you have a telephony player where integration is a challenge, we do have a transfer-based kind of a mechanism as well, where we kind of run the bot on our dialer and are still able to kind of ensure that we are able to kind of transfer the calls onto your dialer as well, which I think effectively what we are doing, Dan, in your case as well.
Mhm.
Got it. Thank you. Cool. Like I said, I want to thank everyone. I'll give here another minute here for any questions, but today's topics, we really did cover a lot, right? We went through AI improving efficiency. We went through the customer experience or interaction kind of feedback loop, compliance regulations, settlement offers, reducing operational cost, the human or ethical, maybe kind of scenarios when it comes to using AI within a business, challenges with implementing and actually integrating the AI systems. And then ultimately we looked at maybe some of the potential risk with using AI. And with that, we also just identified some of the future trends, right? Where is AI going and how it's growing? And that's what makes the technology so exciting, right? Is that it's something that's constantly going to continue to grow and get better. And we're able to do that together with our clients, which is really great. So let's check here, see if there's any last questions. One more here.
Answered it, but yeah.
Okay, thank you. Made it easy. Like I said, I want to say thank you to everybody. Thank you, Dan, for joining. It was a pleasure. Amit, thank you again for hopping on. Just for everyone on the call, I didn't answer some questions on there. You all will get an email with this. You'll get a recording to the link. You'll also have the ability, if you want to schedule any kind of private sessions, any questions, you'll have all of our contact information. Feel free to ask anything or reach out. We want to thank you again for your time here today. And as I mentioned, these usually come out every 2 to 4 weeks. So definitely tune in. You'll get different invites. You'll see them on LinkedIn. Definitely join the conversation. And if you guys, again, have any questions, feel free to reach out. But thank you all. Dan, very special thank you. Glad you enjoyed New York. Hopefully I'll get to see you next time you're here, or maybe I'll come visit you. Definitely warmer where you are. So
Yep, sounds good.
cool. Thank you. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you guys. Have a good rest of the day, everyone. Bye.